There is a specific kind of silence that falls over a living room when you realize your 4-year-old is the only one in their peer group who cannot yet write their name. You are holding a coloring book, and your friend is talking about Kumon, or phonics tutors, or a preschool that requires an entrance exam. It feels visceral, a tightness in the chest. You look at your child, who is currently trying to build a tower out of sofa cushions, and you wonder if you have already failed them. This is the modern parenting paradox. We want them to have a childhood rich in magic and mud, but we are terrified of sending them into a hyper-competitive economy unprepared. We are told to let them play, but we are sold flashcards. Today, I want to sit with that tension. I want to look at the tug-of-war between early academic rigor and the developmental necessity of play. If it feels like the goalposts have moved, it is because they have. What was expected of a first grader 30 years ago is now the standard for a kindergartner. We are seeing a massive cultural shift toward the acceleration of childhood. We view the brain as a hard drive that needs to be filled as quickly as possible, fearing that if we leave any space empty, someone else will fill theirs and get ahead. But does earlier always mean better? When we look at the longitudinal data, the studies that track children not just to 3rd grade, but to age 15 or 20, a much more complex picture emerges. It forces us to ask, are we building better brains, or are we just building burned-out children a few years earlier? Before we unpack these opposing philosophies, I want to invite you to think of this not as a lecture, but as a shared inquiry. We are all trying to navigate this noise. If you find yourself nodding along or perhaps wrestling with these ideas, you are already part of this community of thoughtful parents. We are here to explore, not to prescribe. So, let's take a breath, set aside the panic of falling behind, and look at the first major perspective, the argument for early academic rigor. Let's start by giving the early rigor approach a fair hearing. The philosophy here is rooted in the concept of neuroplasticity and the compounding interest of knowledge. The argument posits that the brain from ages 0 to 5 is the most absorbent it will ever be. Therefore, structured input, specifically regarding literacy and numeracy, creates a foundation that makes future learning easier. It is the belief that competence breeds confidence. If a child enters school already knowing how to read, they are not struggling to decode symbols while their peers race ahead. They are ready to absorb content. This approach values preparation. It views the parent's role as that of a cultivator who ensures the soil is tilled and the seeds are planted in neat rows long before the harvest season of formal schooling begins. It is not necessarily about pressure. Often it is about opportunity. What does this actually look like in a home on a Tuesday afternoon? It often looks like a very engaged parent sitting at a small table with a child, working through a beautifully illustrated workbook. There is a specific satisfaction in it. The child traces a letter A, the parent cheers, and the child beams. There is a tangible metric of success. You can see the progress day by day. It feels safe because it is measurable. For many families, this structure provides a rhythm to the day. It isn't always a drill sergeant barking orders. Often, it is a quiet bonding time over puzzles and phonics games. The parents who gravitate toward this often feel a deep sense of responsibility to equip their child with every possible tool before sending them out into the world. They are often operating out of love and a desire to protect their child from the struggle of feeling behind. However, we have to look at the cost. The trade-off of early rigor is often documented in what researchers call the fade-out effect. Studies have shown that while children who receive intensive early academic instruction often surge ahead in kindergarten and 1st grade, that advantage frequently evaporates by 3rd or 4th grade. But the more concerning trade-off isn't just that the academic lead disappears. It is what might have been lost in the process. When a child spends their cognitive energy decoding text at age 4, they are not spending that energy navigating the complex social negotiation of a make-believe game. We risk trading curiosity for compliance. There is a difference between a child who can read a book and a child who wants to read a book. The risk of the rigor approach is that we inadvertently frame learning as a chore to be completed rather than a mystery to be solved. We might be producing good students, but are we suppressing the natural chaotic instinct of the learner? So, when does this approach actually work? The early rigor framework tends to shine with children who naturally crave order and mastery. You know these children. They are the ones who ask for homework because they see their older siblings doing it. They find comfort in rules and repetition. For a child who is wired with high executive function and a love for symbols, early academics can be a delight rather than a drudgery. It also serves families where the parents feel most connected to their children through teaching. If you are a parent who loves explaining how things work, and your child lights up when they get the answer right, this dynamic can be healthy. The key is that the drive must come, at least partially, from the child. If the child is pulling you toward the workbook, that is a very different dynamic than you dragging them to it. Before we swing the pendulum to the other side, I want to pause on a thought that often gets lost in this debate. We often view a child's refusal to do academic work as a discipline issue, a lack of focus or obedience. But what if we shifted the lens? What if we viewed it as a developmental mismatch? When a 4-year-old cannot sit still to trace letters, their body is screaming for sensory input, not defiance. Their vestibular system needs to move to develop the core strength that will eventually allow them to sit at a desk when they are 7. Sometimes, by forcing the mind work too early, we neglect the body work that supports the mind. With that in mind, let's look at the philosophy that prioritizes the body and the imagination above all else. The play-based philosophy, often associated with Scandinavian models or the Montessori and Waldorf traditions, operates on a fundamentally different timeline. The core belief here is that play is not a break from learning. Play is the learning. It posits that the work of childhood is self-directed exploration. When children build a fort, they are learning physics, negotiation, and structural engineering. When they play house, they are practicing emotional regulation and empathy. This philosophy trusts the child's internal developmental clock. It suggests that reading and math are biological inevitabilities for most children, much like walking or speaking, and that they will emerge naturally when the brain is ready, provided the environment is rich enough. The goal isn't to fill the bucket, but to light the fire. It prioritizes soft skills, resilience, creativity, social adaptability, over hard metrics like word count or arithmetic speed. Living this philosophy is messy, quite literally. The reality of a play-based home is often chaotic. It looks like a living room covered in blankets, scraps of paper, and wooden blocks. It requires a tremendous amount of parental trust and patience. You are not checking boxes. You are observing. You are waiting. It means watching your child spend 3 hours mixing mud and water in the backyard and believing, truly believing, that this is more valuable than a phonics lesson. It involves a lot of strewing, leaving interesting objects around and seeing what the child does with them, rather than direct instruction. It can feel unstructured to the point of anxiety for the parent. You don't get the daily dopamine hit of a completed worksheet. You get a tired, dirty child and a story about a dragon they defeated. You have to trust that the dragon fighting is building the neural pathways for future problem solving. The trade-off here is largely emotional for the parent and potentially transitional for the child. In a world obsessed with milestones, the play-based parent often feels isolated. You stand at the playground hearing other parents compare reading levels, and you have to bite your tongue because your child is currently eating sand. There is a real fear. what if they don't catch up? And there is some validity to the transitional friction. If a child spends 6 years in total freedom and is suddenly dropped into a rigid, standardized first-grade classroom, the shock can be jarring. They may have the cognitive skills, but they might lack the school skills, sitting in a chair, raising a hand, following arbitrary instructions. While the research suggests they eventually surpass their peers in creativity and reading comprehension, the initial transition to a traditional academic environment can be bumpy. The trade-off is front-loading the freedom, which sometimes means backloading the adjustment to structure. This approach is the absolute gold standard for the high-energy divergent thinker. If you have a child who is constantly moving, inventing, and dismantling things, a rigid academic structure at age 4 might crush their spirit before it has a chance to soar. The play-based model protects their love of learning. It is also a wonderful fit for families who have the resources or the community to support alternative schooling or a slower lifestyle. It requires a parent who is comfortable with ambiguity and who can defend their choices against the well-meaning questions of grandparents and neighbors. It works best when the home environment is low on screens and high on loose parts, things that can be anything the child imagines. Now there is a trap that many of us fall into when we try to bridge these two worlds. We rely on edutainment. The apps, the singing tablets, the toys that light up and recite the alphabet. We think we are giving them the best of both worlds, play and learning. But research suggests we might be getting the worst of both. We aren't getting the deep neural encoding of human-to-human teaching, and we aren't getting the open-ended, imaginative benefits of true play. We are just getting overstimulation. It raises a difficult question. Are we outsourcing the heavy lifting of parenting to a device and calling it education to make ourselves feel better? This brings us to the third perspective, often called guided play or scaffolding. This is the synthesis. The philosophy here is that the adult plays a crucial role, not as a commander, but as an architect. You design the environment to nudge the child toward discovery. You don't sit them down to teach them gravity. You build a marble run together and ask, I wonder why the marble goes faster on the steep part. It is intentional. It combines the child-led nature of play with the adult's awareness of learning goals. The adult is present, observing the play and interjecting just enough vocabulary or complexity to stretch the child's thinking, but not enough to take over the game. It's the zone of proximal development, meeting the child exactly where they are and offering a hand to the next step. In reality, this is perhaps the most demanding approach of all. It requires a high level of parental presence and mental energy. You aren't just watching them play. You are analyzing it in real time. You are baking cookies, but you are casually pointing out that 2 half cups make a whole cup. You are reading a bedtime story, but you pause to ask, what do you think the bear is feeling right now? It turns the whole world into a classroom, but a classroom without walls or tests. It looks like a very chatty household. It looks like a parent who is constantly narrating life. It is beautiful, but it is exhausting. It means you are on all the time. You are the curriculum designer, the teacher, and the playmate all rolled into one. The trade-off here is parental burnout. The guided play model assumes a parent has the time, the emotional bandwidth, and the patience to turn every grocery run into a math lesson. It can lead to a parenting style that feels performative, where we feel guilty if we just let them watch a cartoon or play alone in their room without us scaffolding the experience. There is also a subtle risk for the child. If an adult is always guiding the play, the child may lose the ability to be bored. And boredom, as we know, is the birthplace of creativity. If we are always there to facilitate, they may never learn to facilitate for themselves. Despite the effort, this is often the best fit for the majority of families trying to survive the modern world. It allows for the flexibility of real life. Some days you have the energy to build the marble run and discuss physics. Some days you just need to get dinner on the table. It is a forgiving framework because it doesn't demand 100% adherence to either rigor or pure play. It allows you to follow your child's lead while still feeling like you are guiding them forward. It fits the child who is curious but needs a little help focusing that curiosity. It fits the parent who wants to be involved but doesn't want to be a drill sergeant. When we zoom out and look at the research on successful adults, we rarely see a correlation with who learned to read at age 4 versus age 7. What we do see are correlations with self-regulation, curiosity, and the ability to work with others. The data suggests that soft skills are actually the hardest to learn, and they are learned almost exclusively through play and social interaction. Academic skills are relatively easy to catch up on. Social-emotional skills are much harder to retrofit later in life. So, where does this leave us? Perhaps the answer isn't in choosing one philosophy and defending it to the death. Perhaps the answer lies in becoming a student of our own children. Some seasons of childhood require the safety of routine and the pride of academic achievement. Other seasons require the wild release of unstructured play. Our job is not to pick a camp, but to read the room. To look at the child in front of us, not the child in the parenting book, not the neighbor's child, and ask, what do they need right now? Do they need a challenge? Or do they need a break? I want to leave you with a permission slip. You have permission to ignore the milestones for a moment. You have permission to trust that your child is learning even when it doesn't look like school. And you have permission to introduce structure if that is what brings peace to your home. Parenting is not an engineering problem to be solved with the most efficient algorithm. It is a relationship. And like any relationship, it thrives on connection, not just curriculum. I'm curious to hear how this lands in your specific ecosystem. Are you raising a structured learner who loves the worksheets? Or a divergent thinker who needs the mud? Or are you, like most of us, exhausted in the middle, trying to scaffold the chaos? Let me know which perspective resonated with your reality today. Until next time, remember, you are the expert on your own child.